We're at a place where the technologies, including healthcare technologies, it's just absolutely exploding.
What from the best pandemic-driven innovations that we had can we preserve for the challenges of tomorrow?
Guiding growth through education. Lessons in clinical data management.
Hello, I'm Carol Schaffer, and welcome to SCDM's podcast. I'm the Global Chair, and today I'm happy to say I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Brenner. Dr. Brenner is the Principal Deputy Commissioner of the FDA. Dr. Brenner, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the transformative impact that we all lived through COVID-19, and we lived through all of the activities and the frenzy of activities that happened back then. Mm-hmm. And really, there was a lot of activity, but there was a lot of innovation. There was a lot of thinking outside the box. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that and how that has, you know, that's 5 years ago. I can't believe it, looking back.
Right.
So now we're looking ahead 5 years, well, looking back 5 years and now looking and saying, okay, well, where are we now and where are we going? So looking back, what do you believe were the most transformative changes in clinical trial design and execution that emerged during the pandemic? And which of those, in your opinion, do you think should become permanent?
Wow, yeah, we are at an inflection point. So thanks for inviting me to this discussion. And it is hard to believe, it's been such a blur, but I love the theme of this organization and this event being a festival of opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's easy to look back and think about how many challenges there were and how difficult things were during that period of time. But like you, perhaps, I can sense I'm an optimist and you are. What can we learn from all of that work and that frenzy? Well, during the pandemic, I was primarily focused on diagnostics and diagnostic data. It was ripe for innovation and change. And so as an innovator dressed in regulators' clothing, I appreciated both the opportunities and challenges. Some of the things that we did at FDA and on the federal response were trying to promote collaboration across different sectors to optimize the quality, capture, and real-time transmission of data from anywhere it was collected. And so although a lot of my deep knowledge is in devices and diagnostics, I did work across the product centers, the medical countermeasures essentially, and built the data platform for the response at the department level in support of policy making. So some of these themes translate, I think most of them do, and I'll try to keep it there where it might be translatable. Really breaking down preconceived notions about how and where data is generated that's relevant to patients' health, or how and where data is generated that could be used to understand the performance of a product that's regulated by FDA, whether that be under an emergency use authorization pathway or a traditional 510(k) or de novo for devices or PMA or IND or whatever the pathway might be for drugs or biologics. So it pushed us, whether we wanted to or not, into a world where we needed more information in real time that was useful than the conventional systems would afford us. And we also had to be flexible in thinking about how can we get products out and available to patients using different evidentiary standards to meet the need and rebalance the risk-benefit framework. But then how do we continually follow those products to ensure that they are performing how we thought they would based on early data or some subsets of data that weren't as much as we otherwise would have wanted. That forced us into a world where we're thinking more of a continuum as products evolve and how we can look at what we call at FDA real-world data, real-world evidence in the post-market space. Because what you really want to know is how is a product performing when it's being used outside of a tightly controlled and well-orchestrated clinical trial or outside of a clinical trial design. In the real world, it's sloppy, it's messy. I mean, patients or physicians might or might not use or interpret the instructions appropriately. We learned a lot about that with the COVID products. So I think those are good things for all products because the pace of innovation is accelerating, as we talked about, during the conference, and especially products that are integrating software or integrating digital aspects, or where there's decentralized trial designs, or you're collecting patient-generated health data or data that's provided or generated from wearables. These unconventional sources of information. How do we standardize those? How do we ensure, that they're valid? And then how do we integrate the use of that information into our risk-benefit analysis at FDA before they go to market and after they reach patients?
Right.
Because those products will continue to evolve. And the regulatory framework can't keep everyone frozen in time, like in the stage gate. We need to be flexible, we need to think creatively, and we need to adapt and keep pace with the technology as it's evolving.
Right.
So we were forced into that world during COVID. We learned about ways in which we weren't prepared and it didn't work well, but we learned also a lot from other stakeholders with regards to how they can move quickly when we're ready to meet that pace with them.
Right.
So that does excite me a lot about the future of healthcare technology and innovation and cures reaching patients, and also products reaching patients that can prevent and reverse disease.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
upstream.
Yeah. So what's the need for regulatory flexibility, balancing the importance of scientific rigor, especially in the times of a public health crisis?
Yeah. So I guess I touched on that a little bit. We don't like to compromise on our standards and our rigor. And one of the main pillars of the department and FDA right now is gold standard science and transparency and rebuilding public trust. I think those are super, super important, and it's right to center those. What does that mean for regulatory flexibility, though? And in the case of emergency. So I think, while we have and want and should rightfully stick to very high standards for evidence, making our expectations more transparent with developers and sponsors and industry, as well as patients and physicians, is a primary responsibility. Being flexible about how quickly we interpret data and what the standards for going to market with limited authorization or approval, like under the emergency use authorization, for example, is something that we have to be nimble and flexible with. And we were. I mean, there are examples I could give from diagnostics, again, where we looked at serial testing, for example, with antigen testing. We looked at pooled testing. We set new evidentiary frameworks and standards for those, ways to get to market and to get to patients. So we very much wanted to not withhold technologies that could help patients, but we needed to appropriately safeguard the risk-benefit profile once they were out in a way that would allow us to continually evaluate the performance of those products. Now, outside of the context of an emergency, do those goalposts need reset? Because the risk-benefit calculus has changed. And so how do we make use of all of the data that was collected while those products were on market during EUA authorization so that those developers and sponsors could come back in for full market approval or an evaluation, of whether or not those products should stay on market given the current circumstances. So we have struggled to do that very quickly, and so that's something we're looking at now. How can we look at our pathways? How can we expedite, the understanding and goal setting of evidence for these different pathways, along with sponsors in the community, so that we can render faster decisions on market, off market, more info. What's the info? When's the info? And really, I guess to take an even bigger step back, a wholesale reinvestigation of the balance of pre and post market requirements. Because as we, just discussed, these products should evolve and we shouldn't freeze them in time. Emergency or no emergency.
Yeah, and I think we again, when we started this conversation, I mentioned the frenzy of activity, but now it's almost looking back, okay, it was 5 years ago. Wow, it was 5 years ago. Wait, it was only 5 years ago. But almost catching our breath at this point and being able to have that evaluation of, all right, what worked, what didn't. And to your point, let's not stay frozen. Let's move forward. Can you talk to me a little bit about what lessons did we learn about data quality and system resilience through the emergency use authorization, and how can insights from that plan out future clinical approvals?
Well, we learned some really hard lessons, maybe that folks in this community have been aware of for a long time and been chipping away at. but in a whole new, sense of OMG. We have not had good data standards in architecture around clinical data. And interoperability challenges with electronic health records have been longstanding since I was even in medical school training and in residency. I was trained during the era where the only EHR was in the VA, and then the private EHRs were coming on, and we could see initially that there were going to be challenges here. Well, that has just mushroomed with the proliferation of different types of data and where and how it's collected in architectures. So I learned, more than I ever thought I would know about laboratory data interoperability from colleagues who are much smarter than me in those areas. But I appreciated very quickly the challenges and the impacts and how critical it was to solve. So we learned we have a lot of work to do. We learned that it is achievable. We learned that it's going to take an arbiter or a broker who's trusted to set standards, and it's going to take a variety of incentives to get the stakeholders to come to the table and adopt them. We haven't gotten it perfect yet. But I think there's a willingness now in different ways from all of those stakeholders to try to figure out how do we riddle this out. And I think patients also are now better positioned to advocate for those types of things than they were before, because it all came home to roost, in a very personal way and an urgent way for them. So, we talked about before, aside from this podcast, the importance of patient centricity and patient ownership of data and access to data, and even decision making over who has access to their data. This is another big thing that I think technology is going to shoot through the crossbow on. I don't know exactly how. I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, maybe I'd be doing that. We definitely need to align the incentives. And that'll take not just FDA, that'll take different stakeholders as well, to make data quality and data architecture consistent in a way that is maximally useful for each of the entities that uses that data. And in my opinion, in a way that centers the patient around the whole ecosystem, in the whole ecosystem, I should say. All of the clinical data, healthcare data, all of it should be in service of the patient and the patient's well-being. And all of it should be accessible to them and their physicians or their care team to inform their decision-making about the products they use, the medical products they use or don't use, and the true impacts on their health and health outcomes. If we've lost that as our North Star, we've lost our way completely. And in all of the conversations I have about data, often the patient isn't even talked about, which is why I make a point to say this is what it's all about. And maybe there'll be a breakthrough technology or platform or operating system that falls in the hand of a patient, and every smartphone or computer that people are increasingly having, and it will empower them that way. I don't know. We have. We'll see.
We've just formulated our 2030 vision, so everybody has a plan, right?
Good, you've got it figured out then.
Well, it's on the map, though. It really is, and part of it is one of our aspects is the patient voice and listening to the patient, because they are more vocal than ever, they are more educated than ever, they have access more than ever to information. And that being what it is, I love the whole concept of the collaboration between the patient, the caregiver, getting that information out there and having them be part of the age of my elderly mother-in-law or my grandparents saying, well, the doctor knows best and I'll just follow whatever the doctor says, which is fine and worked then. Now I think there's so much more information out there, so it can be a discussion and then a combined decision. So how wonderful is that? From your frontline experience, what from the best pandemic driven innovations that we had can we preserve while strengthening foundations of clinical research for what from the best pandemic driven innovations that we had can we preserve while strengthening the foundations of clinical research for what's going to come, the challenges of tomorrow?
Yeah. Some of the things that excited me most were the innovation and technology sprints, where you were taking people and innovators and companies from different worlds, and they were starting to work together to solve really hard challenges. One of those was data harmonization, capture, and transmission at the point of need or the point of use. And so, again, not to go back to diagnostics, but the over-the-counter test scenario democratized testing in a huge way. Payment, reimbursement, and all of the financial incentives aside, people have come to expect the convenience of having access to a diagnostic or a medical product or something that they otherwise would have needed to engage directly with the healthcare system in a physical brick and mortar facility like a hospital. They're coming to expect that there are different pieces of technology that can give them information about their body, their health, that they can interact with and that can be customized and personalized. There's also an expectation that physicians will use that information in their, hopefully holistic approach to treating that patient. And so the expectation landscape is shifting as generations shift and as the convenience of technologies, not just in healthcare, but every other part of our life shift. And healthcare is behind in a lot of ways. So people are going to be demanding, the consumer base and the desire is going to drive the integration of healthcare technologies in a way that I think traditional models and incentive structures won't. And so it's really up to, now speaking sort of from a regulatory angle, it's up to us to facilitate that and to be very clear about what we do and don't regulate, what is required now versus later, what's reasonable with regards to requirements, and how can we best optimize our approach in service of patients and innovation. Of course, we obviously have the very important and one responsibility of keeping, net negative or net, higher risk and less benefit products off of market. But there's also, we're in an era of more personalization and customization as well. And so anyways, that's all to say that I'm excited about the future. There have been challenges. A lot of the, successes are very hard fought and hard won. And sometimes you take steps forwards to go, backwards to go forwards. But, when I used to be on faculty in nanotechnology and taught about societal implications of tech, I find myself here again, know. And I always sort of come back to this, well, maybe it's because I love that sort of tension. But we're at a place where the world and the technologies, including healthcare technologies and unconventional confluences of software and products and devices and decentralized trials and where we capture and how we capture information and where it's shared, it's just absolutely exploding. And, there's risk there, but there's opportunity. And it's up to all of us to come to the table, and to represent, whatever our set of responsibilities is, personally and professionally, and try to chart a path forward that protects and promotes the health of patients. And we certainly have no shortage of health challenges in this country right now. And, we've talked previously about some of the metrics that are not good over my lifetime. The health of Americans has declined in many ways, while the technologies have accelerated. So, there's something going on there. And it's up to us to better shepherd those technologies to improve real health outcomes for patients. Optimizing health, keeping healthy people well, looking upstream, delivering cures for sure, but also being more holistic and preventive in our approach to mind, body, and soul wellness also. So there's your challenge, right? In a hyper-tech world.
That's a great challenge. And but I look forward to the collaboration, because I think that's in the underscore of everything that you've talked about is the constant collaboration, the transparency, the open dialogue, the respectful debate, and moving forward to the future, because the patient is the North Star, and we have to always keep that in our focus. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you again for the invitation. And I look forward to engaging with the folks that you're in community with. We're all in it together.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.